Every year I end up caring way too much about the Oscars, and every year I'm disappointed. The Oscars have a track record for poor nominations and even worse winners, and especially really bad snubs. But this year, I really like the Best Picture nominations. In fact, they range from films I think are decent to ones that are my absolute favourites of the year. Of course, there's snubs, which include but are not limited to The Lighthouse, Ready or Not, Knives Out, Midsummer, Uncut Gems, Waves, First Love, Shaun the Sheep Farmageddon. But there's no Green Book or Bohemian Rhapsody level takes here, so on the whole, I'm really happy with the selection of nominations. And today, I'm going to be counting down all of them, from my least favourite to my favourite, to see what I think Best Picture should be this year. Let's begin, shall we? Number 9. Ford vs Ferrari. Christian Bale keeps doing this, doesn't he? Last Oscar season he starred in Vice, a fairly generic true story film that's prime Oscar bait, and he was the only real redeeming feature. This year he starred in Ford vs Ferrari, a fairly generic true story film that's prime Oscar bait, but this time he's not the only redeeming feature. He's just by far the best part. His performance is fantastic, and I'm surprised he's not nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He's better than any of the actual nominees in my opinion. In fact, the acting as a whole is pretty great. Matt Damon gives a quality performance too, and it's not as if the film is incompetently made at all. James Mangold is a pretty good director, and the driving sequences are very well edited and tense. My issue is that the film just feels soulless. There's nothing special about the score or the cinematography. Outside of the racing scenes, the camera work is pretty bland also. But most importantly, the plot is painfully cookie cutter. It's incredibly predictable, and I have no clue how they managed to stretch this very basic narrative out to 2.5 hours. While it's nowhere near the longest film nominated this year, it certainly feels the longest, and it failed to keep me engaged throughout. Maybe it would appeal to you if you're familiar with the events the film's based on. I hear it's a very popular dad movie, but if this won Best Picture, especially over the films at the top end of the list, I'd be incredibly disappointed. Though it being at the bottom of this list doesn't mean it's a bad film. I think it should win Best Sound Editing. I don't think it should come anywhere close to winning Best Picture. Number 8. 1917. 1917 is an interesting case in that there's elements that I really like and I think are outstanding, but also elements I really don't. Sam Mendes and Roger Deakins collaborating means the film is amazing technically. The cinematography is outstanding, particularly the scene with France on fire. Roger Deakins does it again, and if The Lighthouse wasn't nominated, I'd say this absolutely deserved Best Cinematography. There's multiple impressive long takes also, with sequences involving lots of soldiers that must have taken ages to practice and time correctly. But therein lies the problem. The one-take gimmick is impressive, also hinders the story as it slows the pace down quite a bit. The first 50 minutes of the film is just going through trenches. I was so bored. The film also has a weak screenplay with some dull dialogue and a very generic, predictable narrative, making multiple viewings of this film highlight the weaknesses even more. The one-take gimmick works well, but it doesn't cover up the weak plot and story. The film as a whole doesn't really deserve any major awards. If this wins Best Picture, I'll be disappointed, but not surprised. I think it should win Best Makeup and Hairstyling, but not a lot else. Number 7. Jojo Rabbit. Quirky, charming, comedic. Not usually words that can apply to films about the Holocaust, but definitely words that can apply to Taika Waititi's filmography. His style is fun and crowd-pleasing, which makes Jojo Rabbit an interesting film. This Nazi satire managed to be convincingly amusing, with a light tone all the way through despite its subject matter. I didn't laugh all that much, but I did find it enjoyable. It wears its Wes Anderson influences on its sleeve without appearing derivative. It's a lot of fun, but why is it here? Jojo Rabbit is a fun crowd pleaser and nothing more. It's competently made and acted, it's well shot, and the direction is fine, but there's nothing particularly special about its presentation. Is it because Waititi is long overdue a nomination? Shame it's not for a better film. I've no clue why Scarlett Johansson's nominated for Best Supporting Actress for her performance here either. She's fine, but not particularly stand out. Definitely not Oscar worthy, not for this performance anyway, which is a sentiment that can be applied to the rest of the film. It's fun and enjoyable, and I did enjoy watching it, but there's nothing about it that makes it deserving of awards. If this wins Best Picture, I'll be more surprised than anything. And speaking of great directors who've done better, Number 6, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a very good film, but it's only mid-tier Tarantino. The film has amazing production design. Everything about it feels authentically 60s, from the outfits to the logos, and especially the soundtrack. The attention to detail is fantastic, and it's perfect at sucking you in and making you feel a part of the world. The acting is also very strong, with Pitt and DiCaprio turning in quality performances. The film works best when Pitt and DiCaprio are bouncing Tarantino's witty dialogue off of each other. Their dynamic makes this film for me. The film as a whole is a bit meandering though, there's no real plot per se. It's just people living their life in this world. What plot there is unpredictable, but quite simple and straightforward, which is unlike Tarantino given his penchant for multi-string narratives. I think this contributed to me finding the film a bit too long. Scenes often dragged for me, and I feel the pacing could have been tighter. This film is also mostly dialogue driven, which usually for a Tarantino film isn't a problem, but I find that the writing here isn't as strong as Tarantino's writing usually is. It's a lot slower and a bit dull if I'm honest. There are some great scenes, great performances, and it looks absolutely gorgeous, but the film's too slow, and there's not enough going on for me to get truly invested. I hope this wins Best Production Design and Best Sound Mixing, but if it wins Best Picture, I'll be a bit disappointed. Number 5. Joker. I'm honestly kind of scared to talk about this film. There's been far too much Joker discourse recently, and I'm honestly kind of sick of it. Before I begin talking about this film, I'm going to put it out there that I think everyone is taking this film far too seriously. It's a DC Comics film, and I'm going to be treating it as one. And as a DC Comics film, it's very good, but I definitely have notes, hence why it's exactly middle of this list. Firstly, the Batman fanboy in me was very excited to see a new interpretation of the Joker, especially one that distances itself from the Batman mythos. In fact, the film's weakest elements for me are the elements that try to tie it into the Batman lore. The writing in these scenes isn't very strong at all. The film is also very derivative of Martin Scorsese's work, playing out very similarly to The King of Comedy, making it appear quite unoriginal, and there isn't anything about the direction that makes it stand out. But what set this film apart from the other films on this list is Joaquin Phoenix's great performance as Arthur Fleck. It's very physical, with a lot of fantastic use of body language. I also love the film's use of colour, making Gotham City appear gritty and dark. The tone as a whole is incredibly bleak, there's a real tension throughout that makes the film consistently engaging, and the brief but shocking moments of violence are incredibly memorable. I really enjoy Joker overall, but I'm perplexed at its 11 nominations. At most it deserves nominations for actor and score, and really shouldn't be winning either. If it wins Best Picture, the internet would have a field day and humanity would probably collapse. Number 4. The Irishman. From fake Martin Scorsese to Scorsese himself, The Irishman feels like a real return to his roots. It's a long gangster epic starring De Niro, Pacino and Pesci, and for the first 2 hours it's classic Scorsese. But the film surpassed my expectations in the last third. The tone shifts into something much more somber and melancholy. This is probably Scorsese's most vulnerable film ever. The leads are all great, Pacino gives a quality comedic performance and De Niro is as usual fantastic. But it's Joe Pesci who really steals the show, with an intense performance that demands your attention. The de-aging effects applied to these actors was also superb and nigh unnoticeable. For a 3.5-hour film, I was never bored. There was enough going on to capture my interest. It's slow but intentionally so. It's not as visceral or intense as Casino or Goodfellas, but it's not trying to be. It's more introspective, looking and reflecting upon the entirety of Frank's life. Even the hit scenes aren't shot with the same stylised, exciting style we've come to expect from Scorsese. They're more workmanlike, a matter of fact. The Irishman is a stunning, introspective look at the gangster lifestyle and is a real return to form for Scorsese. I don't think it should win Best Picture, but I'd be okay with it winning. I really want it to win Best Supporting Actor and Visual Effects, however. Number 3. Marriage Story. Marriage Story is a very real film, almost torturously so. Noah Baumbach gives us a heartbreaking look at a divorce and all of the pains that go with it. Unlike a lot of films involving divorce as a central plot point, both parties have understandable motivations, and you connect with both of them over the course of the film, which is aided by the fact that all of the acting here is insanely good. Adam Driver in particular gives such a raw, painful performance that's beautifully human. He absolutely deserves to win Best Actor this year. Scarlett Johansson was also great, and Laura Dern is hilarious here. She was fantastic. This is also my favourite screenplay of the year. The dialogue is so well written. The only real issue I have with the film is that the score didn't entirely suit it, but when every other element is this good, it's not that major. While it's not my personal pick for Best Picture, I'd be happy if it won, and I actively want it to win Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Original Screenplay. Marriage Story was absolutely incredible, and it's only number 3. Number 2. Parasite. What's there to say about Parasite that hasn't been said before? It's Parasite. It's the highest rated film on Letterboxd. It's one of the most accessible foreign language films ever. It's incredibly well directed and acted. I'm surprised this doesn't have any acting nominations, particularly in the supporting categories. The writing is strong, the plot is perfectly structured with lots of twists that keep you hooked throughout, and the dialogue is smart and witty. I also think the editing is masterful and makes the dramatic shifts in tone feel fluid and natural. What can I say? It's Parasite! It's one of the most critically acclaimed films ever, probably. If it wins Best Picture, I'll be very surprised, given the Academy's bias against foreign language films, but also incredibly happy, and I'm hoping the film takes Best Director and Best Editing also. If you haven't seen it yet, you're doing cinema wrong, but it's still not my pick for Best Picture. That would be... Number 1. Little Women. No other film this year has affected me quite like Little Women has. Funnily enough, this might have been my least hyped film on the list. It's a period piece based on a book I haven't read. It's Greta Gerwig's second film and Lady Bird didn't blow me away, and it has this poster. But 5 minutes in, I was hooked. Everything about this just works. The film has a fair few absolutely incredible performances, particularly from Saoirse Ronan, Florence Pugh and Meryl Streep, who deliver some of the most perfectly constructed lines I've ever heard. The screenplay here is absolutely beautiful. Every line has impact and purpose, perfectly conveying the emotion of the scene. Narrative choices like starting the story halfway through the original novel and telling the opening half through flashbacks all contribute to the emotional effectiveness of the film as a whole. The order of certain events and the repetition of certain shots between flashback and present day in particular serve to make the film more impactful. Little Women is also gorgeously shot, with an incredible use of colour and lighting, making the flashback and present day sequences feel distinct and hit differently. But the clear standout element here is Greta Gerwig's direction, and it's an absolute crime that she wasn't nominated for Best Director. The shot composition, the sweeping camera movements, everything about this film from a technical standpoint is insanely good. Flaws? Never heard of her. This is my second favourite film of 2019, full stop, and it absolutely deserves to win Best Picture. I don't think it will, but if it does, I'll be overjoyed. I also want it to win Best Actress, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Original Score, and Best Costume Design. Little Women is one of my favourite films of the decade. I hope you enjoyed my series of ramblings about films I like, and I hope I haven't annoyed anyone with my opinions. Enjoy the Oscars, and I'll see you next time. This is cringe, kill me.